got, I like Italian. So basically today we got not a special show. We got an interesting show going on today, as there was just recently, I just saw on my Twitter feed, there was just recently a school shooting that happened up in Michigan. Prayers up to those people, actually. Yeah, it was a high school shooting up in Michigan, something crazy. And
when did it happen?
Like
a few hours ago?
Yeah, like a couple hours.
A couple hours. Did it say how many people?
I think they said like 3 or 4 people just got killed. So.
Oh my gosh.
And there was students. So this is basically prayers up to all of them up in Michigan. This is going to lead up right into the topic that we're going to be getting in today. As today I want to talk about something more, an issue that I feel like isn't really addressed around in the country mostly. Something that's kind of getting ignored, and it's really only looked at if certain areas are targeted by this type of violence going on. That's obviously gun violence that's been going on in the city and inner city violence and everything. As recently we just came across, my co-host showed me an article over the weekend of violence in Philly getting up to 500 murders in Philly, and we know that most of that is gun violence. And so today we're going to be talking more about gun violence and violence in the inner city, let alone, as a striking number of 500 in less than a year is something that's honestly like scary and crazy to just like look at, you know?
And being somebody from the area, I can tell you this is like the worst year that it has been for us. And if that doesn't shock you that it was 500, what should shock you is like at least 1/5 of those were children.
Yeah.
That's
like
terrible.
Murder does not sit right with my stomach at all. It does not sit right with me at all. But when it's like kids, I'm talking like some were murdered with like 5-year-old kids. I just read like a news article, like a 12-year-old boy was just like murdered, shot like 10 times. Like
just caught in the crossfire, or was it somebody came in and?
A lot of them was like caught in the crossfire, but this 10-year-old, it wasn't like he only shot 10 times and caught in the crossfire. That was like planned for him.
Somebody went out of his way to kill a 10-year-old.
And also like there was like a mandate like this late summer for like children under the age of 18 in Philadelphia. You had like a 10 o'clock curfew because at that point there was like 130 kids were murdered at that point.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago. I mean, I was raised in the northern suburbs, but I was born in the city. But before that, my mom was a PE teacher on the south side. Mm-hmm. She said that the school, they would close down the school around 2 p.m. because that's when all the gangs would come out. And even then, you could still hear gunfire going across and everything. That was just in the middle of the day. And that was probably around 20 years ago. So you keep seeing the same patterns repeat itself. And I think the death rate's gone up just because, I mean, COVID's just made the economy so up and down. And now that everybody's kind of been able to go back outside, you're kind of seeing the repercussions of that.
I'm sorry. I mean, you said your mom, like, they would like shut it because of like the gang violence would come at 2 o'clock.
Like 3 p.m. they would be on the streets.
They didn't let the GDs in the door.
You was waiting to say that. You was waiting to say that. That's facts, though. That's facts. They said, my mom said they would be like kind of pacing outside. You would see the cars outside, and you could hear gunfire in the distance. So it's a real problem. It's a real problem.
Like, I went to Jersey schools growing up, obviously, but like I have like cousins and friends from Philadelphia that would tell me like in Philly you can't even like. At my high school, you can walk around with backpacks. In most high schools, I know you can walk around with backpacks, but in Philly, you can't do that because there's been like issues of kids bringing guns in those backpacks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they have metal detectors now outside the schools or just at the entrance to check if kids are bringing knives and guns to school.
Yeah, but there's always ways to get around that.
I was gonna say, do those even work?
Like, right. No, absolutely.
Work, you know?
Yeah, people need to do a better job at doing their jobs. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So what's this article?
Yeah. So what was in like the articles? I remember you showed me and everything. It was posted by Say Cheese, I believe.
I saw it on Gilly the Kid. So like basically I remember a week ago I read there was like a issue about a woman from Philadelphia. She had a baby shower. She was shot and killed. Her and the baby, like the baby in the stomach was shot and killed. And then now like during Thanksgiving break, like we have reached 500 homicides because now another woman was killed. And that was just like, I just read that, I was alarming because like now, I wanted to bring you in specifically because you're from Chicago. Now, Philly is competing with Chicago and that's nothing to brag about or to be happy about at all.
That's the thing, it's like you say like the word competing, it's
it becomes a game. And then they start looking at it like the Hunger Games. And
exactly.
who could bring the district its glory or whatever, who could be the bloodiest and the most dangerous. And we were talking about earlier, me and Gary, about Memphis now and Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, and it's happening all over. Whether you want to see who's the deadliest, is people are dying everywhere.
And my issue is, like, with a lot of these, like, major cities, it's like a lot of tourist people, they try to paint the picture of these places are beautiful. Like, in New York City, you think about Manhattan. You don't think about the Bronx. You don't think about all the projects, all the rats and stuff, all the homeless people in, like, serious, like, danger and stuff, all the gang violence going on. You think about Manhattan and Times Square. Philadelphia, you think about the Rocky statue, the Benjamin Franklin statue, the Big Ben. That's not what I think about. I think about stuff like my mom telling me a story about how a man put a knife to her face when she was like 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
That stuff is ridiculous. Like, I remember around this time a year ago, my uncle was murdered in broad daylight. And the issue with Philly, like, there's like a lot of poverty going on around.
Right.
It's not like it's like New York City. You could probably wear like Supreme, Bape, whatever, walk around with that because you can flashy and do that, right?
Yeah.
Philly, you can't do that. You do that, you get robbed. Like, people there are really literally broke and hungry.
Yeah.
When I lived there, I was like, my family was like not doing good.
Mm-hmm.
So it really says a lot about how, like, the inner city, and you can relate that to, you would say, like, you were struck, like, your family, it was tough for you to live and everything when you was in the inner city and everything. Like, you can relate that to maybe why the violence rose. And like you said, over the pandemic, the economy was messed up. The economy crashed and everything like that. And you see that there's a rise in the violence coming up what's been coming up in 2021. It's been coming up this year. That rise, you could obviously correlate it the poor situation, the living condition, and that obviously was amplified by the pandemic with people not being able to earn a real income. And now that they cut the stimulus checks, it's obviously going to get even worse. The fact that a city like Philadelphia is reaching the murder rate of a city like Chicago, something that we thought was. I remember I used to see the murder rate in Chicago being like 500, and you'd be like, damn. I mean, it's really that bad. But now I'm seeing multiple cities hitting that same 500 mark. It's really telling of what's going on in those inner cities. So, like, what would y'all think of why the violence, like, just to jump off that, why you think the violence
Well,
is?
in terms of Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in America. And so what they've basically done on the south side is they basically, now it's gotten better just with what happened in 2020 and the Black Lives Matter movement and people actually really paying attention and white people paying attention to what's happening in POC communities. But we really kind of disconnected, and it's not like New York City where the subway trains and everything's connected. It's kind of like you have the red line, the blue line, and that's really it unless you're gonna take a car. So the north side's all Irish, Italian, Jewish, and then the south side's all Latino and black. And so you have this disconnect. And I was actually thinking about this earlier. When you have disconnect, you have misinformation. When you have misinformation, then you have fear. When you have fear, then it spirals into bigotry and gun violence, and then that cycle kind of repeats itself. So I think in terms of the overall fixing the issue, it's kind of us as a society, having it look at being like it's our problem. It's not their problem, it's our problem. And people are dying, and that's, even if I don't come from the same bloodline or we look different, that's still my brothers and sisters out there getting hurt. And so you have to take that upon yourself and get in there and fix it. It can't just be their problem.
I think it's always just like getting bad or it's getting better. It really just depends on like the climate and stuff. Like we all just said, like COVID made everything like worse in terms of the economy.
It fluctuates.
Yeah, it fluctuates.
Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, I think that honestly, the economy can honestly correlate with the violence in these cities getting worse and everything like that. Because you guys are pointing out big cities. I like to point out some small cities, for example.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up, like, because, I've lived around Philly and Jersey, so there's also a city that people don't know about. It's called Camden, New Jersey. Like, at one point, like 10 years ago, it was, like, the most dangerous city in America. And what helped fix it was they had to reform the police, because, like, that's another city deeply disgusting in poverty. Like you could graduate high school and, like, get an apartment right there, right off the bat, because it's just so cheap. It's just so dirty.
Violence in the inner cities of just smaller cities in general, I think is what's really alarming about this whole situation, is that it's not just affecting like larger cities as it's starting to like crumble down to even smaller cities, and honestly it's starting to say of a bigger even telling issue of this country of why I mentioned the case earlier of the school shooting that just happened up in Michigan. It's obviously gun control. Obviously gun control like goes into this whole scenario of inner city violence, and obviously where is this violence stemming from? It's obvious they didn't just like wake up one day and just build guns on their own. They're obviously like fluctuating in the area and everything like that.
Well, then you look at like the flyover states, they call them, like Nebraska, Oklahoma, like all these like in the South, Alabama, Mississippi, and like you said, it tells a bigger issue of these. This gun control problem that we have.
Yeah. And it's a huge issue right now because it's like 500, I mean, some people would look at it like, oh, these are just inner cities. And like I said, I feel like a lot of these issues get ignored due to the demographic and where it is, because they're poorer in lower income areas.
Yeah.
Like I noticed something, I was just thinking about this. When a lower income area like the inner city of Philadelphia, it took them 500 murders for that to even end up on small blog pages. But then you see like a shooting happen in like a school in Michigan or something like that.
Right.
It gets blasted all over the news immediately. Like there's an issue and everything like that. But it took 500 murders for the inner city violence in Philadelphia to even break headlines and all over the country, you know what I mean?
But then you see the real disconnect between what's actually happening in real life and what's happening on the media, and this disconnect that we have is this over dramatized news on something, and then what's actually happening in the realm of reality and all these deaths that are occurring. So,
because I can tell you straight up, not every like murder makes the news. Because like, look, if all 500 of those murders would have made the news, then like the airtime for Philadelphia would have like been cost billions.
Right. And like you said, where it's happening,
exactly.
You know, where it's happening is apparently has this impact, you know, of whose death is going to get publicized and whose death is going to get thrown away.
Exactly, because like you said, if they posted every single one of those murders, every single one of those murders, every single time that happened, or even gave those people a name who passed away, like gave them like put their name and everything, like they're a bit like they gave them like a praise or something, like on the not a praise, but you know, like a remembrance on the news or something like that.
Like the news would literally last like 24 hours. Like you would have people would not be allowed to go home. They would have news anchor on news anchor. Okay, y'all gotta go at this time. You gotta go at that time. Right. They'll have news lady on news lady. Like they will have to raise the salary for being like a newscast person.
Well, just also from like a journalistic point of view, like making this more specific, putting a magnifying glass on somebody that did get shot in Philly or Chicago or you know, Philly or wherever,
or the Queens too, because like I want because she's in here too. Well, to bring up New York City's also going through a crisis right now too. Specifically the Bronx, but like New York City in general.
Yeah, I don't know what it is specifically. It was going down at least when I was in high school, but the crime rate's been going up. Like I don't think it's just COVID, but that definitely didn't help either.
Well, then you also see like mental illness has jumped up like 5 times, and the guns have jumped up too.
And also want to also bring up too how, you know, in the lyrics, like specifically in rap, you know, like it's also been glorifying lately, just like not just rap, just like in culture in general, to be from dangerous areas, to be active in like stuff like this.
All right. Well, that becomes a double-edged sword, right? Like specifically drill. Like if you're looking like they are reporters of their own story, right? They're trying to tell their story of what they came out of and how they made it out, and it that within itself is positive. But the negative aspect of that is that you're basically creating kill music. You're creating hype up music to go and do those things.
And I don't mean to expose some New York rappers because I've met some of them inside this station, but I just want to say, right off the bat, some of these dudes have publicly admitted to us, like right off camera, they've never hold guns, they never done any of this stuff. So you're promoting something that's very not positive at all, and like you're promoting something false that's making stuff worse.
Yeah.
Look where we at right now.
Yeah. And it leads into this violence rising because it makes it acceptable. And because when you put something like mainstream like that, it makes it acceptable.
Yeah.
And with the media, and the reason why I feel like the media shies away from posting all these murders, and why a blog like Say Cheese will pick up the article, the 500 murders in Philadelphia, but the national news won't put that up, because also they don't want to create fear in people coming over to these places. They don't want to enlight that fear in them, I feel like. But that's like I said, that's not a good thing either, though.
Look, I understand it, but I don't at the same time. Because, like, look, somebody from Philadelphia, like, I gotta speak from my perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia, you think about the Rocky movie, you think about all this positive stuff, but I'm gonna tell you all this, right? A lot of the taxes that Philly residents pay goes towards all of, like, the center city and stuff that they cannot afford to go into.
Right.
Why is there a Louis store in a poverty city where people are homeless, where, like, my sister can buy an apartment for like $800, a whole apartment?
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous. Like, so
they
not
want those tourists. They want them to come in.
yeah, but I'm saying, I know they want tourists to come in, but they also should warn tourists about, like, the real lifestyle that's happening. Like, yo, all this stuff.
Well, in order for the economy to go up, you have to make the city marketable. If you
I
want
was thinking
people to
about
come in.
the word I was thinking about was gentrification. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Like, yo, because basically, like, trying to hide it and just kind of like aids in gentrification. That's making it more expensive for people who already live here.
Well, and pushing the locals out. That's what they're doing. Williamsburg was a terrible area, like 20 years ago, and now that's where hipster kids go and go and paint on the walls.
Whereas most of Brooklyn now.
Most of the people running things, and like the people who come here specifically because they want to live a New York lifestyle, like Becky from the middle of Kansas. She doesn't like in her small town. She comes here and then she posts on her TikTok, oh, here's all the layers I wear to New York City fashion school. Like, the perspective from transplants and people who don't live here is either trendy, I go here for college, I go thrifting and eat out at Instagram-worthy places like 24/7, which people know and they cater to. I went to the Edge the other day. The only contribution it really had to society is a nice view. Like, half the people there were like tourists, and I saw 2 proposals in 10 minutes. It was crazy.
Well, the craziest thing too is obviously we weren't born and raised in New York City, but coming here and seeing kind of more or less real New York, seeing all the more boroughs, whereas somebody who moves here that lives in a gentrified part of Brooklyn or Manhattan, it's kind of funny. They're more ready to say they're a New Yorker when they're not. And we're more ready to say, listen, I'm from somewhere else, but I understand what's going on in the actual city of New York.
Yeah, I love the vice versa, the TikToks I always see, like the one you brought up where you see the girl from Kansas showing all the nice stuff she did. But I've also seen some other TikToks of people oh, this is what New York's really like, the dirty subways, the rats all over the place, the dirty food, the homeless people all over the place.
Yeah, and then those videos just end up on actual New Yorkers' pages. So what I was saying before, the idea that people who aren't born and raised here have is either this nice trendy thing or Zoo York, where it's wild and wacky and people say bing bong F your life.
Yeah.
I love that.
Bing bong.
And you're right, exactly. People, it allows them to portray the image. And these cities, these inner cities, these cities, because they ignore the inner cities a lot, I feel like. They would rather portray the image of not the 500 murders in Philadelphia, but the Rocky statue, the beautiful Philly, go get a Philly steak, just stay away from this area, or just don't go over there, or just don't talk about what goes on over there, but you can go there. Because it's funny that you bring up Chicago, how you have the experience of your mother living in the South Side. My sister, Atia, she's probably watching this, but she lives in Chicago right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's told me how she lives in the north end though, near.
Do you know what area? Lincoln Park, Rogers Park area.
She used to live around Lincoln Park.
Okay.
And she now lives near the shore and everything like that.
Okay, so probably Gold Coast, West Side area. Yeah. That's a nice place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and it's interesting. Every time I go to her place, I remember my friends. Every time I go out there, they're always like, "John, be careful going to Chicago," because they all obsessed with Chicago.
Right.
They all have that mindset.
Chirac.
Exactly. They all have that viewpoint of that. But then I go there. I'm telling them, I never seen none of that stuff. Because it's
right.
You obviously don't get exposed to.
There is a clear separation.
Exactly.
A clear cut of where the south side starts and where the north side begins.
Yeah, you brought up that great point of segregation in these cities, of how they kind of group some people just up together, where it's like, these, like, for example, like, these certain neighborhoods don't get along with each other, but you'd rather have them create all that mess down there instead of bringing it all the way to, like you said, the nice part, the west side, the Gold Coast. They'd rather, and then you relate to New York City, you'd rather have that violence in the Bronx. You'd rather have that in the small sections of Brooklyn. You'd rather have it in Canarsie, but you don't want it to happen in Williamsburg.
Right.
You'd rather have it happen in the Bronx or Harlem, but you don't want it to happen in the Upper East Side.
Well, we're still dealing with the repercussions of what this country was made out of, right?
Yeah.
And those, what we're talking about specifically is these red line communities where black people or people of color couldn't go outside of these areas and buy homes. These real estate agents would basically cage them in and then keep them there. So we're still dealing with that. It's obviously gotten better, but not to the degree that we're satisfied with, obviously.
Which is why they made Levittowns.
Oh, the Levittowns are the...
Yeah, that's like those are like the quote-unquote American dream, like where they made suburbs for white people affordable for them to pay for it.
No, exactly. Yeah.
There was a whole story about when like a black family was able to get one, and then now they were being harassed.
Yeah. So you have these red communities, redlining, and then you have I did a whole paper on this, and then yellow and blue, and then green. Green is like the most wealthy, we're the top of 1%. Yellow is like, white, middle class people, and then, blue I think was like suburbanized, upper middle class. But you have these sections where you see these problems, and it's still an issue today.
And it's clearly...
No, I'm saying you gotta think, because like the Great Migration was only like 130 years ago? Or like maybe a little more than that. Because the Great Migration, like, some of us are still poverty people from the South who came up to cities like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, even people from New York who traveled over to Connecticut, because they got to think that partially happens as well.
Yeah,
so we're still dealing with the repercussions of that, still trying to bring money up. We still, some of us still have not, been first-time millionaires in our family.
Yeah.
Right. That's the biggest problem, right? Generational wealth.
Basically, all that stems together, all that roots in together and creating a big problem of, like I said, gun violence in these heavily black populated communities. Where it's like I said, we don't understand the gratitude of it until you really go there. You realize these aren't just 20-year-old gangbangers that you see making music getting killed. This is 10-year-old kids, 40-year-old mothers, 30-year-old mothers.
I always have this mental image of a kid just trying to get to school, he's super obsessed with superheroes or sports or whatever it may be he likes, and he's just on his way, and then he gets gunned down or she gets gunned down. It's just
it doesn't sit well with me at all. What business does a 9-year-old have with getting killed?
Right. Exactly. Right. That's why it is, and then it just leads into my thing. What do you think the solution could be for this? Do you think this will add, do you think obviously I know a real solution to this, where it's just you got Camden, where you just reformed the whole thing.
I was about to say that, Camden reformed the police, Also, gentrification, if you're gonna make it more expensive to live there, also up the wages.
Right, exactly.
Up the wages, make it also stop the discrimination with jobs, help.
Well, then give the people the locals an opportunity to actually stay there and re-up on their community.
Exactly.
Because they were there, they were born and raised there. They should have the right to stay there.
Exactly.
You kicking them out is just throwing that whole vibe away from that place.
Exactly.
And also, I feel I was gonna say more food drives and stuff, more donations and stuff that could help out homeless people, that could give people what they need instead of them having to go out and rob for it.
One point about the food and helping out people stuff, and I see community fridges and by my crib, but I also saw the pizzeria a block from my house that's been open for 25 years. It's a Texas chicken burger now. I think things would get better, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure if things would ever really change. First you'd have to get people to care. You'd have to somehow revoke the Second Amendment and maybe melt down every single gun.
Right.
Just make it extremely difficult for you to just make it logical,
Fun short story about my neighborhood. It actually used to be filled with white people, wealthy-ish Jewish people. I live in Rosedale. It's right next to the wood of Long Island. And then in the 70s, a few black people families moved in, and then all of a sudden,
They all did.
they're all gone.
Right.
Yeah, because nobody wants to live with Negroes. I saw like a documentary from my neighborhood about like these like little black kids getting like yelled at and like rocks thrown at them by like white kids before they moved out.
This was when, in the 80s?
70, 80s.
70, 80s?
Yeah. So the more things change, the more things stay the same.
Right.
It required like very deep like societal like reckoning, like changes.
It's gonna take a while.
A
It's
while.
It's not something that can be done in a day.
Nah, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right. I don't know if it's. You guys think we're gonna see it at the end of our lifetimes, or you think
No.
it's gonna be?
I definitely think like we're gonna at least see like a major improvement. From
Yeah, I'll see an improvement, but no full change.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is an issue that I think should be talked about more, and I think should get more coverage in the news. I wish the mainstream media would do a better job talking about this inner city violence, and we shouldn't have to wait until I see a report on a blog like Say Cheese telling me 500 people got killed in Philadelphia. I should be seeing better reports about this all throughout the year so we can solve this. Hey, I was saying Black Lives Matter and everything like that. So let's put it something to the fact, So like I always like to say, I like to conclude this show. I'd like to thank my featured guests for coming on today.
Try to fit in the camera.
Come over here.
Try to fit in the camera.
Do the face, Jason.
What's the face?
Got my featured guests right over here. Got my co-host right here.
Yes, sir.
And we're just gonna conclude with my name is John JS, whatever you want to call me. And that is the J.S show. I hope you all have a good day.